I didn't even make it to the end of my 12-hour shift before the birthday that should have been mine got stolen from me, first in a text, then in a way I could touch. An empty space where my car should have been. Before I dive in, tell me where you're tuning in from in the comments, and hit that like button if you've ever had to draw a hard line with people who thought family meant free pass. This is the story of the day I stopped being the household ATM, and how the fallout gave me a better life than I thought I was allowed to have. My name is Rowan. I turned 24 this morning, standing in the supply closet at Bayview Regional, replacing a box of pediatric 4 tubing because inventory never matches the chart. There was no cake at the nurse's station, no surprise party, just the steady beep of monitors and a toddler with a dragon bandage who refused to give up the stethoscope he'd liberated from my pocket. I love this floor, the hum of purpose, the way children rally in ways adults sometimes forget how to. I'd planned to meet my friends for dinner after shift change and make a night of it. Nothing elaborate, just pasta, music, and people who knew how to say good job without adding a price tag. My phone buzzed. One text, then another. The first line hit like someone pulled the floor out from beneath me. Dad, we sold your car. Family comes first. Be grateful you live here rent-free. Rent-free. I actually laughed. The kind of laugh that's dry and quiet and not funny at all. I pay $400 on the first of every month and have since I was 17. There are receipts with my father's signature in a shoebox under my bed to prove it. My car, my little silver hatchback I saved for and bought in cash, doesn't belong to the family. It belongs to me. The second text arrived before my indignation could fully arrange itself into words. Dad, you'll cover your brother's tuition. $6,200 due by Friday. Non-negotiable. My stomach dropped straight through to the linoleum. The phone blurred and sharpened. For a moment, I could hear only the sound of my own breathing through the cheap paper mask. Then someone touched my elbow. You okay? Jade asked. She's a night nurse like me, loud earrings, soft heart, the kind of friend who brings tea without asking. Birthday wishes, I said, because the truth was too much for a hallway. All the warm fuzzies. She gave me the look people use when they know you're lying, but also know you need them not to call you on it in public. We're still on for Marina House after shift? Yes. It surprised me that I meant it. Unless the building collapses. Then we'll move the party to the parking lot, she said, bumping me with her hip and moving on. I called my father from the supply closet. Voicemail. I called my mother. She picked up on the fourth ring. Rowan, this isn't a good time. Her tone was bright. I could hear a TV in the background and my brother's laugh, unconcerned, unhurried. You sold my car? The words felt like they'd been sanded down to something small, as if asking a question would make the theft sound less like theft. Your father handled it, she said, with that airy finality she uses when she wants to make something sound like a done deal. We need the money. It's family. You can take the bus. Plenty of people do. The title is in my name. A pause. Then, like she'd practiced it, your father added his name at inspection. You signed. Remember? I remembered signing something in the kitchen on my way out the door months ago. Registration renewal, he'd said, tapping where I should sign. You're late for shift. Hurry. The memory slid cold into place. Fraud can wear a father's face. And the tuition? I asked because I needed to hear her say it. You've been blessed, Rowan. She softened her voice like that made it gentler. A good job, no real expenses, a roof over your head. Chase needs a hand starting out. Families help each other. In our house, that seems to mean I help and everyone else takes. Don't be cruel, she snapped and cut the call. A minute later, my brother texted me. Chase, thanks for covering tuition, Ro. Dad said you'd handle it. You're the best. Raising hands somewhere between the hand emoji and Dad said, my hands started shaking hard enough that I had to brace them on the counter. I stared through the tiny plexiglass window at the hallway at a life where I gave shots and calmed anxious parents and let a 4-year-old pretend my forehead was a drum and never had to think about forged signatures. I could not fix this in Scrubs. For the next 6 hours, I functioned on something like autopilot. I passed meds. I coaxed a smile out of a teenager who hadn't smiled in 3 days. I wrapped a blanket around a mother who hadn't slept in 30 hours. I accepted a little paper crown from a girl with pigtails who decided I was a princess because I said her stuffed penguin needed a name. By the time I changed out of my teal into jeans, I had 8 missed calls from my father and 2 from my mother. The messages escalated the way they always do when their plans are questioned. Reason, pressure, threat, guilt. We did everything for you. I stood in the staff locker room, jacket half on, listening to my father call me ungrateful and my mother wonder aloud why I always make things difficult. I texted Jade. Me, something blew up at home. I can't make dinner. I'm sorry. Her response was immediate. Jade, come anyway. Or come crash on my couch. Or both. I'll come to you if you need. I almost said yes. Then I thought about walking through my own front door and finding a different person inside me there, the version who nodded and folded, who apologized for being an inconvenience. If I didn't confront this now, that version would lunge for control. If I delayed, the reasonable compromise would arrive neatly packaged, my savings emptied, my car gone, their narrative ironed flat by morning. I took the bus home. The ride took 45 careful minutes of city stops. I stared out the window and counted the reasons I was allowed to be furious. I practiced sentences in my head that started with no and didn't end with sorry. I breathed. The porch light was on when I walked up the path to our little salt box in Seabrook. The flower beds were always neat because Marla, my mother, liked things that made neighbors think we were tidy people. The driveway looked wrong in a way you feel first, before you know why. Then I understood, the jagged gap where my car always fit between the oil stain and the cracked line of concrete. Empty. My life as negative space. My father, Grant, didn't look up from the television when I pushed open the door. There she is, he said. Birthday girl. Dinner's hot. Where is it? Where's what? He still didn't look away from the game. It's always games or numbers with him on the TV, in the paper, on the napkin where he tallies what you owe him. My car, I said, and made sure there was no tremor in it. Sold to a guy who paid cash, he said, as if he donated a kidney in my honor. Good deal, too. I'm a tough negotiator. Happy birthday. Marla swept in with a casserole dish and a smile you reserve for guests. It faltered in the face of my expression. We can talk at the table. Chase thumped down the stairs, smelling like cologne and confidence. Hey, tuition fairy, he grinned, as if we had that kind of easy, as if I were a standing punchline in a family that teased because it loved. You're a lifesaver. We're having pot roast, my mother said. The insistence in it was almost comical. Rowan loves pot roast. Rowan used to live a world where pot roast meant we were celebrating something besides my compliance. We sat. We passed rolls. We did the ritual of normal family. Halfway through, Grant cleared his throat in the way he does when he's about to make a decree masquerading as a question. About the college payment, Friday. You know the amount. No silence is a thing you can hold up like a shield. No, I repeated. What do you mean no? My father smiled without his eyes. You live here for free. I don't. I pay rent. I buy groceries. I cover the internet and half the utilities. I've bought all the laundry soap since I was 19. I replaced the washing machine when it died. I paid your cell phone bill last winter because they shut it off. I paid for my nursing program. And I paid for my car. You wouldn't have that job without this house, he said, like the roof conferred my license. We kept you off the street. That doesn't give you the right to sell my property or declare my savings a scholarship fund for Chase. Chase blinked. It was the first crack in his bravado. Wait. They sold it without asking you. Grant finally looked at me. His stare is hard when he wants it to be. You signed the paperwork. You put my name on it. You put your name on it, I said. I signed something in a rush that you told me was the registration renewal. Forgery isn't a parenting tool. My mother flinched like I'd hit her. Don't use that word with your father. What word? Forgery? Theft? Or no? My voice was calm, which made my father angrier. He likes fights because he's good at them. He's less good at stillness. You have 2 choices, he said. You write that check and you remember who fed you, or you find somewhere else to live. Family first. You left out a third, I said. I leave anyway. Don't be ridiculous, my mother said, her eyes shining. When she cries, she makes little sounds like the end of a song. Where will you go? Somewhere I'm not the emergency fund and the villain. You always do this, my father said. When it gets hard, you make a scene. I pushed back my chair. It didn't slam. It didn't need to. This isn't a scene, Dad. It's a decision. And if I've learned anything in 24 years in this house, it's that once I make one, you'll decide it's disrespectful. So let me be clear, I'm leaving tonight. You're bluffing, Chase said, half fascinated. You can get your things tomorrow, my mother pleaded. Sleep on it. We're a family. It's your birthday. It was not lost on me that this was the first time anyone had said the word aloud. I'm done sleeping on it, I said, and went upstairs. In my room, the one with the 2 short curtains and the bookshelf that used to be a crib rail if you look closely, I sat on the floor and let myself feel it, grief sharp enough to cut, fury that made my fingers numb, relief that made the ceiling seem higher. I called Jade. Couch, she asked, before hello had finished. Please, come now. I'll buzz you in. I started packing with the weird precision you get on nights when adrenaline is the only thing holding you together. Clothes I needed, scrubs, my favorite sweater, the mug with the chip, and the little painted fox. The quilt my grandmother stitched by hand when I was 4 with a crooked R in the corner. I pulled the shoebox from under the bed and slid out the stack of rent receipts I'd been saving for a tax story I knew I'd never tell. Grant Sanders, received from R. Sanders, $400, date scrawled, his initials. Then the folder with my original car title, only my name, and the registration that had sprouted an extra signature since. I took pictures of everything, dates, amounts, signatures, the way certain bills had come directly out of my checking account when the lights were late. The paper gave shape to what I'd felt for years. This wasn't help. It was extraction. When the suitcase was full and the backpack zipped, I opened my laptop and made a spreadsheet. Not because I'm petty, because numbers tell stories that feelings can't. I listed out every rent payment since I was 17, the loan advance I gave my father for a deck repair that somehow never became a deck, the family emergencies that always aligned with a new TV or a weekend trip, groceries and utilities, and you owe us for gas. You used the car back when it had been the family sedan, before I could afford my own. I noted car sale, unauthorized, and put beside it the fair market value I knew from the listing I still had saved in my email. I wrote it all in black and white until the page looked like a map of a road I'd walked with my eyes shut. Then I drafted a letter. Not the kind you write when you want to hurt, one you write when you want a record. Dear Grin and Marla, it began because Mom and Dad didn't fit what I was about to say. This letter serves as formal notice. I itemized the amounts, the dates, the incidents. I referenced the state statute on title fraud that I found online and the tenant rights page about retaliatory eviction. I attached photos of receipts, bank statements, and the front and back of the original car title with only my name. I printed 3 copies. One for me, one that would end up in a lawyer's hands, one for the kitchen counter. At 2:30 in the morning, the house was the kind of quiet that feels like a held breath. The TV was off. The nightlight in the hall made a little pool on the carpet I remember my bare feet finding when I was 8. I carried my suitcases down the stairs on the edges of steps that don't creak. I left the letter packet on the counter under the magnet shaped like a lemon. I opened a new email, attached the digital files, and sent them to an attorney whose website mentioned family financial abuse in calm, unflinching language. Subject: Inquiry plus documentation. I updated my passwords and logged out of the shared accounts my parents still had access to because once upon a time convenience was mistaken for trust. At the door, I looked back once. The living room lamp cast familiar shadows. The quilt on the couch. The photo of me at 12, missing a tooth and holding a softball I never liked. The space where my car should have been was there too, in the picture my mind took, the outline of a life shaped around someone else's wants. I wrote one text to my mother. Me, I'm safe. Don't contact me. Jade opened her door in pajama pants and a sweatshirt with a glittery moon and didn't ask questions. She took one of my bags and asked, tea, and I loved her for it. Sleep, I said. Even better, she answered, and set out an extra blanket in the guest room like she'd been planning for me to come all along. I slept the way you do after a fever breaks. Sunlight and coffee pulled me back. The text notifications blinking on my phone felt like a slot machine I didn't want to pull. 27 missed calls. So many voicemails it made me tired to think about pressing play. Messages from my father in escalating tones. From my mother in plaintive loops. From my brother, shorter, confused. From Aunt Ruth, my father's sister, half curiosity, half concern. Ruth, your dad is storming around the backyard talking about lawyers and slander. What did you leave them? Are you okay? Me, I'm okay. I sent the documents to an attorney. Please don't call them for me. I need space. Ruth, I had no idea. Call me when you're ready. There were other messages from cousins who'd never texted me before, from a neighbor who heard shouting, from my father's friend who said, "Your dad says this is a misunderstanding." It's funny how quickly people find your number when a story threatens to include them. Jade poured me coffee into a mug that said "Not Today, Satan" in curly letters. What's the plan? Lawyer. Apartment. Job already knows my new contact info because I sent it last night. Saying it out loud made it more real. Take my life and set it back upright. You want backup? Yes, I said, surprising both of us. I called the attorney at 9 when the office opened, explained the bare bones of the situation to a receptionist who did not sound surprised, and somehow got a same-day appointment. At 11, I sat across from an actual person, Celeste Park, whose office had diplomas and a plant that looked better than plants in offices usually do. I'm sorry, she said, and I believed her. Walk me through what happened, and then let's talk options. I gave her the short version. The long one would take years. She thumbed through the packet I'd left for my parents, and then printed for her, asked clarifying questions no one would ask unless they understood the terrain. When she got to the altered registration, she didn't make a face, but her eyebrows did a small, telling thing. The car is the cleanest piece, she said. It's yours. They sold it without your authorization. The attempt to add a signature you didn't intend is problematic for them. The rest, the rent, the family contributions, those are murkier, but we can still work with them to establish a pattern. What happens next? A demand letter, she said. We ask for the full sale amount of the car plus additional compensation for documented financial losses. If they refuse, we file. We also report the title issue to the DMV fraud unit. You should change your accounts and protect yourself, which it sounds like you've done. And perhaps most importantly, you do not go back there alone to argue. I snorted. That's the first step I've nailed. She smiled. Good. And Rowan? This is going to get noisy. You were allowed to let it be loud and not manage anyone else's feelings about the noise. I didn't know I needed a lawyer to grant me that permission. Jade drove me to a small apartment complex near the bay where the rent was not kind, but not cruel either. The manager had a 2-room unit open on the top floor with sunlight that made the tiny kitchen look like it forgave its own size. It cost more than I wanted and less than I feared. They could add basic furnishings for a fee. A month ago, I would have flinched. Today I signed because sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a life I chose was better than a bed in a house where the price was myself. By afternoon, I had a spare key on a key ring, a leasing packet tucked under my arm, and a new address to memorize. I stood in the naked quiet of rooms that were mine and realized how loud peace can be when you haven't heard it in a while. I turned my phone back on. The first voicemail was my father, the anger low and controlled, the threat implied. The next was my mother, the cry talk heavy with phrases like, "After all we've done," and "What will people think?" Chase's message came 5 down the line and made my chest tighten. Ro, I didn't know about the car. Dad said, he said you offered. But then Mom said something about the title and did they really? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm sorry if I didn't see it. Call me if you want. Or don't. I'm sorry. It would be neat for the story if I told you that shook me into forgiveness. It didn't. But it cracked something that had hardened around how I'd seen him, the golden boy who never looked down to see what he was standing on. Aunt Ruth texted again. Ruth, your dad tried to report the car as stolen. Officer asked for the title. It didn't go well. He's blaming your mother. She's blaming stress. The neighbors are pretending they can't hear. Are you sure you don't want me to pick up anything from your room? Me. The quilt and a box of photos are all that's left. I've got the important stuff. Thank you. Ruth, you threw them off their axis. That's not a bad thing. I answered only the messages that didn't demand I fix anyone's discomfort. That meant Ruth. It meant, cautiously, Chase. It did not mean my father's sixth call, which began with, "You think some printed pages make you a victim? You're not taking us to court," and ended with, "Name your price." The demand letter went out by certified mail the next morning. Celeste copied me on the email to my father's newly hired attorney, cordial, clinical, unshakable. When the DMV fraud investigator called me 2 days later, his voice had the steady pace of a man who had seen every version of a bad idea and still managed to be polite. I sent him what he asked for. "This is enough," he said. "We'll handle our part." In the slots where panic usually slotted itself, something else settled, resolve with edges smoothed by exhaustion and relief. The group chat from the pediatric unit lit up at 7 that night. Tina, party redux at Jade's. Pasta. Cheap wine. Honest opinions. Jade, translation, we're feeding you and then stealing you for movies. Mateo, our favorite resident who always warms his hands before an exam. I have a cake. It is of questionable shape. Please pretend it's a heart. I went. They made me wear a paper crown a toddler had drawn smiley faces on. Jade taped a hand-lettered sign over her bookshelf. Happy Row Day. Tina's cousin, who manages an apartment complex, brought a smirking succulent in a ceramic sloth for my windowsill because everyone needs a houseplant that looks like it knows secrets. We ate until there were only noodles left and told stories that had nothing to do with my father's temper or my mother's tears. When Jade raised her glass, her voice didn't wobble. To Rowan, she said, who finally charged her worth like a line item and collected. By the end of the week, the first offer arrived, car sale price and a little extra if I promised to keep my mouth shut. Celeste looked at me through the glow of her computer screen and said, "We can counter." We did. We added the little extra to a line that reflected some of what the spreadsheets had mapped. The deck that never materialized, the loan that wasn't, the rent paid into a house where I was told it was charity. They balked. We waited. They caved. $41,000 and a clause that didn't ask me to swallow my own voice. It wasn't everything. It was enough to buy a used car in my name and pad an emergency fund with numbers that felt like air in my lungs. It was enough to pay off a small student loan early and put the rest where my father couldn't find it in the night and call it family. When the check cleared, Chase called. Community college for now, he said without hello. Financial aid said state can wait. It makes sense. Cheaper. Closer. I actually like the idea of not jumping into debt. I wish I'd thought about that before. I wish someone had let you, I said, and realized I meant it with more gentleness than I expected. How are they? Dad's weirdly quiet. Mom's cleaning things that don't need cleaning. Aunt Ruth is here a lot. He hesitated. He said you ruined his reputation. At Rotary. Like that's the worst thing that happened. His reputation will recover if his integrity does, I said. Maybe not at Rotary. Chase huffed out something like a laugh. He's mad at me for not being mad at you. You're allowed to be whatever you want about me. I think I was blind, he said. That's different. It didn't fix us. It started something like a real sibling relationship. My mother sent a card without a return address in the top left corner, like the envelope might accuse her. Inside, my grandmother's pearl earrings pressed into tissue paper and a note that said only, "These were supposed to be yours." It was the closest thing to an apology I've ever received from her. I wore the earrings to work the next day and let the cool weight of them anchor me when the unit swelled with admissions at 3 a.m. The extended family did what extended families do when a story threatens their sense of themselves. They divided. Some called to say they'd always suspected things were off. Some said nothing. Some insisted that, whatever happened, it shouldn't have gone public, as if privacy were the reward a secret wins for good behavior. I went to Aunt Ruth's for Sunday dinner and ate on her porch, and when my father's name came up, she put her hand over mine and said, I told him he drew a circle so small even he couldn't fit in it. I cried into my chicken and didn't apologize. Baby's nursing director pulled me aside after report one morning. You're doing good work, she said. I hear nothing but excellent things from families. I had the bandwidth to hear it because my life wasn't bleeding me out in the background. I signed up for a pediatric trauma certification and started mentoring new hires. You're calm when it matters, Tina told me after a code. I forget you're 24. I forget, too, I said, and it wasn't self-deprecation, it was awe. 3 months in, Ruth asked if I'd meet her and Chase at a diner halfway between their side of town and mine. When I walked in, he stood. That alone felt new. He slid a black velvet box across the table. Mom found it in the back of her jewelry drawer, he said. She said, give this to Rowan before I change my mind. It's the ring Nana left you in her will. I guess. She forgot. I opened the box and there it was, the tiny opal that flashed colors like it didn't want to be one thing. I put it on and felt something settle inside me. Not forgiveness, like a switch flipped and made it tidy, something more like reclamation. Dad is selling the house, Ruth added, tearing a sugar packet into perfect halves. Says the neighborhood isn't what it used to be. Translation, I said, people saw who he is. She didn't argue. When the moving truck pulled away from the curb in front of my childhood home weeks later, I didn't drive by. Chase FaceTimed me from the sidewalk. The roses were still blooming. A different car sat in our old spot. The porch light was off in the middle of the day for the first time in a decade. Feels weird, he said. It is weird. I'm taking ethics this semester, he said. Professor says a system is as healthy as how it treats its most vulnerable member. He looked at me through the screen. I know what that means now. It's possible to be proud of someone and wary at the same time. I let both exist. A year to the day after the text that said, be grateful you live here rent-free, I poured coffee into my own mug in my own kitchen with my own plant in the window and realized I was, in fact, grateful. Not for what they did, for what it pushed me to do. I had a new car registered in my name, paid for by a check written by a man who liked to say, we did everything for you. I had an emergency fund with 6 months of expenses. I had a little framed print by the door that said you owe nobody a ruin in looping script because sometimes you have to hang your lesson somewhere you'll see it before you leave. I had friends who'd become family in the way that matters. Jade who texts home. When I work a double, Tina who shows up with soup when I get sick like nurses don't. Mateo who never lets interns talk over me in rounds. I had a brother who asks how I'm doing before he asks for anything and has done the astonishing work of learning how to be decent without applause. I do not have my father. I have my mother only in glimpses. A text on my birthday that says, hope you're well, a picture from Ruth of her planting azaleas, a story about her joining a book club and not reading the book. I have boundaries that don't bend toward other people's panic. I have a lawyer who sends a holiday card with a snowman wearing a tie. Sometimes I think about the girl who signed where her father pointed and called that love. I want to tell her she was doing the best she could with what she knew. I want to tell her she won't always have to make herself small to keep the peace. I want to tell her the price of keeping someone else comfortable is often your whole life, and that's too expensive. If you're listening and you felt a jolt when I said, they sold my car while I was at work, I need you to hear this. Taking care of yourself is not betrayal. Boundaries aren't punishments. Refusing to be robbed of money, of voice, of time doesn't make you cruel. It makes you whole. Drop a comment if this sounds like home in the worst way, or if you've been the person who left before the house finished collapsing. Like and subscribe if you want more stories that don't pretend blood is thicker means let them drain you. And if it's your birthday today, I hope someone who loves you puts a candle in something sweet, even if it's a donut from the hospital vending machine at 3 a.m. For me, the revenge wasn't a screaming match or a public spectacle. It was a PDF. It was a lease. It was a key on a ring with only my fingerprints on it. It was an ordinary Tuesday where my phone didn't vibrate with demands I owed nobody. It was living so well that the girl who signed without reading wouldn't recognize what she gets to have. And that, in the ledger I keep now, goes in the column labeled, finally.